Welcome back to the CNR Podcast, episode 82. I'm Griffin Aldrich. Alongside me, we got Carl McDonald and Tommy Martinotti, and we are back with another episode. How have you guys been? Long time since we talked, it felt like, we just had the New Year's episode, and this is our first episode of 2026, which is crazy to me. Like, we haven't uploaded a podcast since last year, so just gotta throw that out there. But how are you guys feeling about the Celtics right now? Because I'm feeling pretty good. And again, we mentioned this last recap, but I'm throwing it up again. Celtics have the number 2 seed, so gotta show some love to the C's. But we'll start off with Carl, go to Tommy, and back to myself. Carl, how are you feeling about the Celtics and their play recently? And I'm just impressed. I'm impressed. I'm blown away.
Yeah, no, same sentiments here. Impressed. It gets me excited and even more curious to see how well this team can manage throughout the remainder of this season. And I just can't wait to see what else we're going to get from them.
Well said. What about you, Tommy? How are you feeling?
Yeah, it's been very exciting watching this team. I think they, had a pretty much as perfect as a West Coast road trip as you can have. Dropping that game against Portland, which was a close one, but taking care of business with everyone else that they saw. Just guys continuing to step up. I think we're just continuing to see this team get better and better as the season's moving along here. We'll talk about Jaylen Brown and all the other guys in a little bit, but just seeing the team's confidence, it seems continues just to grow week after week. And, with the trade deadline approaching, we'll see what moves they may or may not make. But I've been extremely impressed, excited. They've been exciting to watch and just excited to see where they go for the rest of the regular season and playoffs.
Yeah, well said, Tommy. And Carl, both of you guys. I mean, like, this Celtics team has been so much fun to watch. Again, we've talked about this over and over again, and you've heard the whole league say this was a tanking team, not like speculated to be in tanking conversations, to now being a couple games away from the number 1 seed. I mean, we'll get into that later too, but it's just been a fun season. But my first question for you guys in our first little debate, could Jaylen Brown win MVP? And we've had these type of conversations already on the podcast, but could you guys really see him be a strong suit for MVP? Because again, before we talked about this last time, he did not have a 50 piece against the Clippers. Then he drops a 50 piece against the Clippers. And obviously, we talked about this last recap. So go check it out after if you guys want. But, that night after, he kind of had a night off. But if we continue to see this from Jaylen Brown, would it really shock you if he stole MVP away from Jokic or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? Because I'm gonna say my 2 cents first. I think the fact is that, it's him leading this team, a team who, again, I just mentioned, was supposed to be in conversations for tanking. And then, you see Jaylen Brown and he's leading this team all the way to the number 2 seed and potentially a huge playoff run. Because, again, we know, and I don't even want to say the East is weak because you still have heavy hitting teams like the New York Knicks, like the Detroit Pistons. And Carl, you mentioned this on your recent video, so you go in for it too. But I think there's a really strong chance that we went into this, so we're not going to go too in depth with it. I don't know if Jaylen Brown gets MVP, but I think he comes away higher in the voting than last time we talked about it because, again, he's putting up an amazing run. But what are your thoughts, Carl? And we'll go to Tommy.
Yeah, looking at Jaylen Brown and how well he has played with this team, pretty much averaging 30 points, so far this season, he definitely should be in more conversations when it comes to this year's MVP. Now, as to if he should win it, I say he could win it, but with the competition ahead of him, such as a Jokic and SGA Giannis, I don't think he will win it. Even a Luka could, pass him up in that sense, and maybe some politics here and there, because that's a big reason why Jaylen Brown is not even really in these conversations to begin with. whether it's hate towards the Celtics or any type of association against the Celtics, there, is always going to be that narrative that Jaylen Brown can't, even though he should at least, the very least, be put in that conversation of maybe even winning an MVP. So as of this season, as of right now, although he is playing the best basketball of his career, and that's just going to continue for years and years, I don't see him winning it just because of the competition ahead of him and low-key because of recency bias.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, he is very deserving to be in the conversation. It feels like since he didn't make didn't win Player of the Month, and then that 50 piece happened, it feels like that kind of caught the attention of a lot of media and fans that weren't watching the Celtics every night on a nightly basis. So it feels like, since that game, I feel like he's gotten a little more respect from fans around the league and media as well. But to be honest, I feel like if he continues the way he is playing and the Celtics continue to exceed everyone's expectations, there's no reason why he can't win it. I think Jokic, with his injury right now, he's not even going to be able to win MVP because he won't have played enough games in the regular season. I saw some stat on that. So Jokic, in my opinion, would be the biggest threat just because of, again, the insane numbers that he continues to put up year after year. And I think an MVP, in my opinion, has a lot to do with winning. So it depends, how the Thunder do for the rest of the year. They've kind of been struggling over the past week or so. So it kind of depends, who finishes where in the standings. Along with, of course, injuries. Obviously, it's still earlier in the season, so you never know what can happen with injuries. Hopefully, everyone stays healthy. But the way Brown has been playing, the way he can play on both ends of the court, and just to see him leading this team and how they're exceeding everyone's expectations, even, Celtics fans ourselves. So just the way Brown's been playing, his efficiency and playing both ends of the floor, I think, if he keeps it up and the Celtics keep winning games and moving up in the standings, I think he's very deserving of an MVP this season.
Now, and I want to, because Tommy, you kind of answered a question I was going to ask you guys next, because Jaylen Brown, and I agree, like with Jaylen Brown, he's always been the second guy. He's always been the guy involved in trade rumors, like for Kevin Durant and everything. He's never felt respected in Boston and as a player himself. Even going back to his teacher, the quote that his teacher said, like, I'm going to look you up in the jail 7 years from now or something like that, so he's always been disrespected, but and Tommy, you kind of mentioned it, but I want to go around as a whole. Like, what do you think it takes for Jaylen Brown to get the credit he deserves? Is that an MVP? Is that another, what does it take? Because I even saw them talking about this on 98.5 the Sports Hub, and they were talking about this and what credit does he need in order to feel like, all right, I'm at where I want. Because me personally, I think the disrespect that he's received in his past and everything, he just needs to keep being mentioned in these conversations and stuff. And, you see without a Tatum-less team right now, he's carrying the load. And if not playing better than Tatum played last year, I might be wrong with that, but I think that's the case. But Carl, what are your thoughts? And then we'll go to Tommy.
Yeah, when you're looking at Jaylen Brown and what he's, doing for us this season and even in seasons prior, I don't think it's necessarily, he has to do this or do that to, I guess, win over the crowd. In a weird way, it's their perception of him because he's doing everything that a lot of people didn't expect for him to do. This is a guy who has been to 2 finals. This is a guy who not only won his first ring back almost 2 years ago, but was the finals MVP and still isn't getting the respect that he deserves. He's in the same talks, the same conversations as a Larry Bird, as a Paul Pierce, Celtics greats who have won the finals MVP, yet for some reason is still being made fun of because he doesn't have a left hand, even though he's proven time and time again he does. Again, he's averaging 30 points this season. He dropped 50 on Kawhi Leonard and James Harden, and people even discredit that, saying, oh, they're not in their prime. Doesn't matter. the fact that he did that and the fact he's doing all that, truthfully, Celtics fans and a lot of people who actually recognize and watch Jaylen Brown's games will understand that this is a guy that is deserving of being in the MVP conversation and even legendary status conversations, and of course there's just going to be those people who hate to hate, again, Celtics haters, Jaylen Brown haters, so on and so forth. So there is a lot more for him to do, but at the same time, he's already proven himself, and it's really just the people's perception on, JB.
Yeah, I think, the people that have negative things to say about Brown, I think personally, I don't mind it because I feel like it just fuels Jaylen Brown. We see him work harder and harder. It feels like every single offseason. Every single year he comes back looking even stronger than he did the year before. And just the way he's grown on and off the court, he's very active around Boston with fans. We've seen that. So I think, the naysayers and everyone that has negative things to say about Brown, I feel like at the end of the day, it's kind of pushed him to get to where he is right now and, the way he's been playing because, he's aware of these things. He's pretty active on social media. Recently this year, he started streaming. So, he makes his opinions pretty well known. He doesn't really hide his emotions or what he's thinking. And I love that as a fan. Just to see that competitiveness and, he has a chip on his shoulder at all times. And I feel like he's truly never going to get all the credit that he deserves because he plays next to Jason Tatum. And up until this season, let's be real, everyone knew Tatum was our 1A and Jaylen Brown was our 1B. So, that's the real reason, in my opinion, why Brown kind of gets overlooked is because he's playing next to another great player in Jason Tatum who, let's be fair, gets more credit than Jaylen Brown does. But something I've been thinking about, and I want to ask you guys this, is this year's Jaylen Brown better than any of Jason Tatum's best years as a Celtic? I think that is, we can save that conversation for another day. And I just think, there's arguments for both sides, but I think that's a great question that Celtics fans can kind of think about and just, have open debates about.
Let's dive into that because, this is an interesting one. This is the one that, people want to hear. Carl, do you have a decision on this one? Because
it's a tough one. It's a hard one.
Yeah. Carl, do you have an idea on this one yet?
It's still pretty...
But it's hard. It's hard to say it because, again, we've seen Tatum carry this team for a couple weeks without Brown, and he's done a phenomenal job, but we haven't seen him have this much of a season, right? Like, we haven't seen him.
I know we don't have the numbers in front of us right now. I know that, but I just think that's a great, fun question that you can ask yourself as a Celtics fan or as a sports fan in general. It's just, I thought about this today, and I think it's a great question, and, you can have great arguments for either side. And to be honest, as fans, what better argument can we have than who is our best player? Up until this point, most people would probably say it's Jason Tatum, but now Jaylen Brown has a pretty convincing argument to maybe he should kind of be our 1A guy. And especially with Tatum coming back from, a serious injury, kind of let him take that back seat and kind of let Brown run the show a little more. Now seeing where his confidence is at. And, obviously Tatum's going to have to get work back into just being on the court with everybody. But I just think that's, an interesting question that fans can kind of ask themselves and just kind of have that debate with one another.
Yeah, because that's the thing too. And then Carl, you can mention your 2 cents after, but that's the thing too. You look at this and it's like, all right, we all want Tatum to come back 100% healthy and everything. But realistically, in crunch time too, who are you giving the ball to once Tatum comes back? Are you giving it to Tatum or Brown? Because realistically, we all hope and dream that Tatum's going to come back and not skip a beat from where he left off, but that's not the case. It's going to be slow and build up to it. But when Tatum eventually builds up to that, are you going to trust Brown with the ball more than Tatum at times? That's another good question.
It's a great debate, but it's something that you really don't have to worry about at the end of the day, because it's a win-win, really. I think right now you're going to give the ball to Jaylen Brown because, like you said, Tatum's just going to have rust. It's going to happen. He's going to have rough games. He's going to have multiple rough games coming back from an injury. He's not going to be what he was when he got hurt in that Knicks series. It's just not realistic. And now that we know where kind of Jaylen Brown is now elevating his game to another level, it just gives the Celtics so much more flexibility and confidence to not rush Tatum back. And when Tatum is back on the court, you're not going to have to play him 30, 35 minutes a game and have him shoot 25 shots a game, because you already have a guy that can do that and has proven this year he's capable of kind of carrying the load for this team.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, though, Carl?
It's definitely a very weird situation, but easily, if you are the coaching staff, even if you're Brad Stevens, obviously you're mainly going to trust Jaylen Brown in, crunch time moments and just in general for most of these games. Because, yeah, when you're bringing back Tatum into a system that is built around Jaylen Brown as that main guy, there's the minutes restrictions. There's, the simple conversations of, hey, are you comfortable? Are you okay? And, you get into the minutes restrictions. He might not even start. Sam Hauser is going to get that start over him, or Jordan Walsh. And when Jason Tatum is actually ready, he starts, but could still be on that minutes restriction until his body and, him mentally is, all there. But of course, as we, talked about, it's not going to be the same Jason Tatum, even with him being at least 80% of what he originally was. It's like you guys said, it's not going to be the same Jason Tatum, and he's really going to have to ease into that role. And even when he is 100%, going into this season or the remainder of this season into the next season, you're not going to get the same Jason Tatum. And for the most part, you're going to rely more on Brown. And that's okay, because you're eventually going to find yourselves, seeing Tatum still hungry and still looking to, push the Celtics team to even greater heights than before.
And I want to mention something on that too. Like, the fact is, we talked about years ago ripping these two superstars, and we didn't, but like Celtics media members, they talked about ripping these two apart. And now it's like, I trust these two. Like, these two are some of the greatest in the league, and when we come down to it, Jaylen Brown, I think, is easily going to be on first team, all NBA, like, I think when it's said and over by the end of the season, Jaylen Brown is on first team all NBA, and Tatum for the past, 2-3 years has been first team all NBA, right? Am I wrong with that? Something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like you're having two all NBA guys paired together. Like, again, there's a long road for that, and that's a huge conversation, but I don't know. That's going to be a fun one when they come back, and I'm excited for that. But do you guys have any more conversation on the Jaylen Brown buzz? All right, well, let's move into this because, again, this isn't our trade deadline special. We're going to bring you guys that when it gets closer, but there's some buzz. We're getting to the point in the season where there's some buzz, and there is some buzz indeed. This is quote from, I'm giving David credit for this one because I have to say, it says right here, Stevens not putting a ceiling on this group, said that the media, they're open to being buyers. So, trade deadline, a little ways away, but, that sounds positive to me. They're open to being buyers because now you see this team in the number 2 seed. I mean, they're buying in. And my first one is, we've seen the buzz around with Anthony Simons and Zubac. What is your guys' input on that trade? Because the rumored trade, it would be Anthony Simons and a first-round pick in order to kind of give some relief off of the salary from Anthony Simons on the expiring deal. Would you guys like that move? Because, again, we talked about this a little bit on the recap as well, but would you be willing to give up your first-round pick next year also for Zubac? And, I mean, it shows, too, that, Simons can be a really good player on this team. And, we're going back to last game because he won CNR MVP. I mean, your depth for the guard position is going to be low. You have what after that? You have Derek White and Peyton Pritchard. Who else do you have? Shulga? I mean, I can't really put a
Ron
name.
Harper Jr.
Oh, Ron Harper Jr. Silly Griffin. Yeah, but if you do that, you're gonna probably have to call him up and put him on a standard deal. I mean, what is your guys' thoughts though? Do you guys like that move, or would you prefer? I don't know. We'll start off with you though, Carl.
Griffin, you really got me with that one because I really would have jumped on that one just because we really need a center, and Zubac is a great, option for this team. But you're mentioning that first round pick, and you're mentioning Simons too, who again has now really stepped into his role and purpose for this team, and that is just to come off the bench and give us a lot of good shots. Honestly and personally, maybe, maybe I could go either way. Maybe just because on one hand, we really do need that, big man center depth. But of course, as you've mentioned, we still need that guard depth too. We also have, Yogo Gonzalez, but he's not, there when it comes to the offense. He's great pretty much on everything else but the offense. So I don't know. Maybe we could trade for somebody else that is also a center. But yeah, I don't know about this one just because, again, of the other metrics and everything else you'd mentioned.
Yeah, what do you think, Tommy?
I personally wouldn't do it. Griffin, you kind of said all the important notes. I think Simon's ability to score off the bench is extremely overlooked from a lot of fans, just because, like you said, where do you kind of go after Derek White and Peyton Pritchard? You pretty much have no guard depth after that, and you have more center depth than guard depth. We have Luka Garza, who's been getting more minutes recently. Josh Minot could step in if you want to go with a smaller lineup and run him at the 5. You have Amari Williams, who's a young guy in Maine right now, who's developing, and I think in a year or two can play great minutes at the NBA level. So I think it's a bit of an emergency trade that I don't think Brad Stevens will make. I do think, however, if there's other centers that are available for a little bit less of an asking price, then I think we can see, Brad Stevens make a move there. But I think with the first round pick being thrown in there, and also with, what Simons does give you off the bench from a scoring perspective. And he has gotten a lot better defensively, I'd say, as well, in kind of this last month or two of the year. So me personally, I would not make that trade.
Yeah, and I want to talk about this too, because I think last podcast we were very set, or the podcast before, we were very set on shipping out Simons for a big man like this, because again, he wasn't as productive, but he's feeling more comfortable with this team. And you kind of look at this, and we mentioned this earlier in the season. If Simon's productivity goes down, you could just re-sign him for a lesser asking price. Now, again, would Simons be open to doing that when kind of the Celtics treated him the way that he was treated? I don't know. I don't know his feelings towards the Celtics organization after what the Boston Celtics put him through when they traded for him, and then they were kind of looking for another destination for him to come to. And again, it's like the same Jaylen Brown buzz that we had and how upset Jaylen Brown was, but Simons hasn't even had any chemistry with this team. So that's the only way I could be like, Zubac, I think that's a golden piece, because I think, that'll help your big man conversation right now, especially because he has years on him. He's a very good option to have at the 5 position. And I would love that for sure. But I just don't like this move unless we're getting a guard in return as well. Maybe we swoop in on the Trae Young news, but I don't want to do that, and that'll be a funny topic we'll get into later. But it's like you have no backup after that, and it's like, again, Tommy, you mentioned it. You have Amari Williams, who is a guy we're going to talk about later in this. Luka Garza has been playing good. Kata's been playing good. I think the 5 position is still in conversation because you need a guy, but who do you let up after that? You're definitely going to have to get rid of Tillman at some point and Boucher, because they're just not doing it. And then you come into the conversation. If this team, because this is a tough conversation. If you trade for Zubac, you might have to get rid of Amari Williams. And do you want to get rid of this guy? I don't want to, because I think he's, I know you guys know my thing with the Maine Celtics. Obviously, I've connected to this player, but he's so efficient. And because I don't think the team's getting rid of a Luka Garza right now or an Neemias Queta. I just don't see that happening. So I see the next guy is maybe Amari Williams, because that's the next guy that is next up for the Celtics. But what do you guys think? I'm yapping along here. And you guys.
No, pretty much, yeah. I think our team, is set and making like I was one of those people who said, yeah, I would love to just give up Simons to get that center. But this team already looks really good. We're the second seed. And yeah, I agree with you guys. We should not potentially blow up this team just to get Zubac and then possibly put ourselves in an even, worse situation than a lot of people had projected us to be in.
Yeah.
I think we have way more center depth than we do at guard depth right now. And then obviously getting rid of a guard and adding another big, you get positives out of that in ways, but I think you would just get more negatives out of it. You would lose a lot of scoring, which is important, obviously, in the NBA nowadays. And I think, Queta has improved throughout the season as well, getting more comfortable in this offense. I mean, is he your all-star, going to blow up stats in the box score center? Definitely not, but I think he gets the job done. He plays hard defensively. He's a lob threat around the rim. I don't think that trade's kind of necessary the way this team is built right now and just the way they're winning. And, you don't need to make a trade like that when you're seeing success with what you already have.
Yeah.
Right.
And I have to say, I agree with what you guys have said. Maybe a lesser guy, because you got to, again, I think guys like Boucher and Tillman are out on this team. I don't see them giving anything more. If you get another, all right, because I saw this one. Say the Celtics go after Ayo Dosunmu. There we go. I think I said it that time. If you trade for him, all right, I'm just going to give you guys a hypothetical trade thing. If you guys trade Ayo Dosunmu for Tillman and we'll say Boucher, you acquire him, and then you make that Zubac trade. Are you guys happy? Do you think that's a productive trade deadline? Do you like that, or where are you on that, Carl? What are your thoughts? Tommy, you go ahead and then.
Yeah, I think that is definitely more enticing just because you're getting, another guard in return. And Dosunmu is a solid player. I don't think he has the same scoring ability that Simons does off of the bench, but is he young? I think he is a little bit younger than Simons, and he is definitely a much better defender than Simons is. So if that was the case, I think I would lean a little bit more toward yes. But just the way this team has been playing as of late, and I just don't see too much that has to be changed for this team to get much better, to be honest. How much better does that trade make the Celtics at the end of the day? It's definitely more enticing, but I'm pretty content with kind of the roster they have now.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, though? And he's 25, so a year younger.
Yeah, I remember he was drafted a little after Simons, but I knew, Simons is younger than a lot of people think as well because he's been in the league for a while. But Dosunmu is also a younger guy too.
Yeah, what about you, though, Carl?
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't mind doing something like that. Or, what we were talking about in our Big Man Talks episode, pretty much we could shop for Nick Claxton. I don't think we would have to give up a whole lot for that, so why not?
Who would you give up for him, though?
Pretty simple. Tillman and Boucher. Maybe a pick, so yeah, not too much, but enough to where you could make it fair there.
this is gonna be a hot take, and just in case, but also Luka Garza is on such a small contract. I wouldn't give him up because it's such a team friendly deal. I think the big thing I wouldn't. This might be a hot take, and I don't think I would do this, but I think to match the salary, you would probably have to give up Hauser because
That's fine, bro. I'd be fine with that personally.
what if you guys did like instead like a Hauser, gave up Hauser, Boucher, and
a second round pick,
and maybe throw in who else would you have to throw in there? Probably
that's got for Nick Claxton.
Yeah, but
that can't be that.
The tough thing though, I think the only trade that you would get for Nick Claxton though is Simons. Like, I just don't see them doing any. What do you got? Though?
I mean, I would love that. I think Sam Hauser's been great. Developed a lot, obviously, coming from Maine and moving up to the Celtics and playing big minutes for the past few years. But I think, with the way Jordan Walsh and Hugo Gonzalez have looked so far this season, those are guys that can easily step in and give you the same minutes that Hauser's giving you and give you a little more production, in my opinion, just because they're more all-around players. Obviously, Hauser is known for his shooting ability. And I think the way Jordan Walsh is developing and Gonzalez, I think they can both kind of easily kind of step in and take those minutes that Hauser's been giving us for the past few years.
And Carl, I'm mad at you because you got me hooked on Claxton again. Because every time I tell you, every time I bring it up too, I'm the one who's like, all right, gotta go for Claxton. And I got it out of my head, Carl, but you brought it back. So I don't know why I'm so stuck on Claxton. I just feel like he fits Celtics organization. I don't know. I feel like I just see him fit into the green. I think he gives everything we needed. But then again, you might have to bounce back and get rid of a Luka Garza or I don't think get rid of him, but cut his minutes down because I'm just so high on Amari Williams, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I have another trade I saw out there, and if you guys are really convinced on getting another big man, because that's what Celtics is kind of about. They're really like, all right, our big man depth is a problem, which it's not because we got 50 something rebounds last game, right? Like, I don't think our big man depth is as big of a problem because the league is changing. Like their big man can pass the ball now. You don't see so many traditional big men out there. But here's a fun one for you guys. I think it was NBC Sports Boston that rumored this one as one, but like a potential trade case. Chris Boucher for Nick Richards with the Phoenix Suns. And that one raises an eyebrow because Nick Richards has fell to the third on the depth chart for the Phoenix Suns, but I think that's more of a player that you could utilize and the Celtics could utilize. And I wouldn't mind going after a Nick Richards, but Carl, what are your thoughts? And we'll go over to Tommy. Would you entertain that one? Because we're so stuck on getting a big man, which I don't think we need to, but this would give you a big man. What are your thoughts, though?
Yeah, I'm kind of the type of person to look into the future and say we would just need the big man just in case if we needed more rebounding, defense, and maybe offense. Now, for a Nick Richards, I'm not sure. But Chris Boucher, we have not used him since I don't even know how long. So I don't think we should keep him long term. Just give him up for somebody,
Yeah.
What about you? I would do this trade in a heartbeat. Honestly, they haven't played Boucher the entire season at all. And I think Nick Richards is a solid NBA center. He got starter minutes when he was with the Hornets. He got starter minutes last year in Phoenix. So he's an experienced guy that, provides similar play style to Queta. Does he move the meter on how much better the Celtics get if he's traded to the Celtics? I don't think so. But if you're telling me that we could get rid of Boucher and get Nick Richards in return, then I think that's, a pretty easy yes for me, just based off, Nick Richards' NBA experience that he's kind of had and has played bigger minutes for, some non-competitive teams. But, we haven't gotten any minutes out of Boucher, and it seems like, he's not in the future plans for this team. So I don't see a reason not to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's a new look for both players. I think, he's had some declining plays, like his game's declining a little bit in Phoenix. And as you see, he's moved third to the depth chart. I mean, and Boucher, we haven't given opportunity. So I think, boom, that's a win right there. Just a new scenery that could be due for the guys. But also, one thing I see with this, though, that kind of turn off for me on this trade is, like, I just see another Tillman situation. I see you get Nick Richards, and you're like, oh, good move, like a solid guy who could just give you minutes off the bench when you need him. But then it's like, all right, we're not even going to play him. That's what I see happening with this Nick Richards trade. But I have one more question, and then we can move on because, again, we're not too close to trade deadline yet. Yeah, we're running up on it. So actually, two more questions on it. But my next question for you guys with this one is, I think, once it's all said and over with, Tillman and Boucher need to be off the roster after trade deadline. And I know that's a hot take, and I know Tillman might bring some energy on the practice team or whatever. And I'm just saying this for the benefit of both those players. I think, they still have an opportunity in the NBA, and I think they should deserve and go take that opportunity. And the Celtics are obviously not providing that. So I think for the better for those two players, once trade deadline said and over with, they need to be off the roster. Whether it's getting young guys that can just, be that spark plug like Josh Minot and Luka Garza were at the end of the bench for the Timberwolves last year, or I don't know. But Carl, we'll start off with you. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts along those lines?
No, I absolutely agree with that. And it's like we highlighted in the big man talk as well a while back. Yeah, Boucher not being used is crazy to me because I thought he was going to be similar to what KP was for the team. Um, and then you get Tillman. We got him during the trade deadline during the season we won the championship.
Yeah.
And he's had his moments, and it's just like, why are we not building off of those moments he's had? He is kind of clutch. He is productive as well, and he's young too. So it's just like, why are we not using those guys? So definitely in the long run, I would want to see those guys succeed. And if it has to come down to them leaving the Celtics to do that, then that's great for pretty much everybody because those two really do deserve better to play on teams where their skills are going to be maximized and really be shown.
I think that Boucher is a guy that, definitely deserves to be traded. I don't think he's been too happy with the way, he's been given so far this season. But I think Tillman's, more of a veteran guy. Yes, he is younger, but I feel like he's, a vocal leader to a lot of the guys in the locker room. We've heard guys in the past talk extremely highly of, Tillman's work ethic and the things he does behind closed doors. So I think, Tillman has more of a role than, just his minutes on the court for this team. I think a lot of the guys probably look up to Tillman. He's always saying one of the first guys closest to like where the coaching staff sits on the bench. So he's very active on the bench during games as well. So Tillman's a guy that, I wouldn't mind see sticking around just for really leadership purposes. And, if Keita gets hurt for a few games or Garza's out, I don't think, if Tillman kind of gets some of those minutes, I don't think we're going to see a crazy drop off in, any specific area. So I think Boucher does deserve to, get a different opportunity on a different team and kind of prove himself once again because he does have some talent. And we've seen that when he was with Toronto. It's just the situation in Boston, isn't really working out with him.
I agree with that too. I feel like, Tillman, like that's a guy you could see just stay, even for a practice player. I think he's a good practice player. And like you said, he's a veteran, Yeah, he might not get the minutes on this team, but he's a good leadership role model. He's a good locker room guy. But my last little trade deadline, this isn't even a trade deadline episode. What am I talking about? But, we're at the point where it's like the trade rumors are popping off. Trae Young. And it looks like he's by the time this might be even posted, he might already be in Washington. I'm shocked we haven't even got a tweet or anything that he is, but it looks like it's going to be him for CJ McCollum and like a first round or a couple of first round picks. But what would you give up for Trae Young to Boston? I hate that because he killed the Celtics. That wouldn't even be I don't know. I don't know. What are your guys? Who are you giving up for a Trae Young? Would you guys out on that? You guys saying no? I wouldn't even give Boucher up for him. Carl, you're
Yeah,
shaking your head. Right.
absolutely not. That's like that's like the rumored Giannis trades.
When you're wanting to go to Washington though, and you don't want to be on a contender, because I think that's a guy who could totally be on a contending team.
Well, the whole reason that he wants to go to Washington is because he knows that he's gonna have the ball in his hands. Hard no for me. I wouldn't trade any single player on this roster for Trae Young. If Trae Young came to the Celtics, we would see an instant decline in their wins and losses. He can play no defense. He's very inefficient, and he's a ball-dominant player. He is a good player. He can make at a very high level. Obviously, he can get hot from three and, put up 30 points in a hurry. But he's very inconsistent, doesn't play defense, very undersized. Again, inefficient player. I'm not a Trae Young fan. I hope he goes to Washington or wherever he ends up going and has success. But to be honest, I don't think you could maybe name a worse player that fits this team less than Trae Young does.
Yeah, what do you think, Carl? Any other thoughts on that?
No, Tommy's absolutely right, and I agree with him. Yeah, we can't sacrifice any of these guys for Trae Young. Like I said, it's like the rumored trades for Giannis. It's you don't want somebody who's already led a team and is ball dominant and just wants the ball in their hand, and even worse, doesn't have the defensive qualities that players should have and other qualities to make teams successful. So yeah, just go to Washington, have your fun there, and yeah, he definitely should be on a contending team because he's gotten the Hawks to the conference final, but not here. No, I wouldn't even give up Boucher for him.
Agreed.
I don't think this is a player that should fizzle out of the league because I think he's very talented, but he just needs to change up his game and change up a mindset too. Like you have talent like that and you want to go to Washington. It's like, I don't know. But next up for you guys, kind of moving out of the trade talks now, is Josh Minott next up on the chopping block for the Celtics. Not chopping block, but like decline in minutes, like kind of the phantom injured list, kind of like what you've seen with Boucher and what you started to even see with Luka Garza, because Minott's minutes have went so far down. Then he got a DNP, but now it's now I think he was out with a ankle sprain or something like that. I don't know what it was last game. Let me try to see what he's supposed to be out with while I'm looking. Yeah, left ankle. So what are your guys' thoughts? Carl, we can start off with you. Is he next up on the chopping block, or do you think it's he still has stuff in him? What do you think?
He could be on the chopping block, but at the same time, I feel like the Celtics should invest in him, at least for maybe another season or two, because he was very promising in the early, stages of the season, and he was a starter too. It's just a matter of getting him back into the fold and really, showcasing his skills. Happened with Luka Garza, where, wasn't doing too hot, and he also wasn't getting that many minutes, and now he's showing that, hey, I could be a valuable asset to this team. So definitely keep Minott and try to utilize him as much as possible.
Yeah,
I don't think Minott should be a guy that the Celtics look to get rid of on a very small contract. And Minott was one of my favorite players to start the season. One of the guys that plays really hard when he is out there. This is a prove it year for him as well. Obviously, this is his first time kind of getting some minutes in the NBA. But Minott's the guy I think that can, down the line, whether it's this season or next season, get some valuable minutes for this team. One thing about Missoula that we've seen so far this year is rotation is always changing. You guys brought up Luka Garza. We've seen guys like Simons get, less minutes for stretches of the season and then get more minutes. Same with Hugo Gonzalez and Jordan Walsh. Like, start of the year, Hugo Gonzalez got some bigger minutes, and then he dropped off for a few weeks and got a lot of DMPs, and then now he's, having a consistent role again. But I think, Minot's the guy that can help this team win games throughout the course, of this season to finish out the year. He brings a lot. He's a great rebounder. He's a good defender. He can shoot the three ball. He's not, offense isn't, his go-to game, but I think he can space the floor for other guys, and he's also a lob threat. We've seen that, him get out in the fast break and be able to catch lobs. So I like Minot a lot, and I hope they keep hang on to him because, he's on a very friendly contract, like I already said, and when he's out on the court, I feel like he's giving you, pretty productive minutes. So I hope, they don't just, sit in Minot for the rest of the season because he's a young guy that can help the flow of the game.
I agree. I don't think they should be out on him. I think this is a guy who, again, they really should keep going and keep giving him opportunities when they can. Again, they're out there to win, and what Joe Mazzulla has been playing with his cards has been winning them games. So I don't think you should be out on him. And, I like him. And I think, them still trusting him and going to him needs to be a factor. Like, you need to do that because they're only going to get better when you throw them out there. They're not going to be like, you can't just say, hey, I gave you like 3 starts and then, you start declining. So we're not going to give you more opportunities. I think opportunities will kind of be out there for him, but he needs to go out and get that, like Luka Garza did, like Hugo Gonzalez did. I think that's what he needs to take full capability of. And next is Jordan Walsh, because his game again has declining, and it looks like, he had a very good game against the Clippers, but against Chicago, played 18 minutes, had 5 points, 5 rebounds, shot 50%, was a 7+-. So not a bad game, but is his game continuing to just downfall, or do you guys think that he just needs to really get connected to? And what are your thoughts? What does Walsh have to do?
I would say just come to the realization that, hey, there's a reason why this team is trusting you, so just continue to do what you were doing, what got you that starting position, and really had a lot of people turning their heads because initially Jordan Walsh was just, a kid that not a lot of people had a lot of belief in. And now he's a starter who could in the future be a key rotation, piece within this team once Jason Tatum returns. So definitely, I'm not losing any hope or, any sleep on a Jordan Walsh and his current, or not current, but like recent productivity, just because he has shown that he can be very reliable and also have similar qualities that Josh Minot had towards the beginning of the season.
I'm not worried about Jordan Walsh at all. I think, you kind of just have to trust the process with him. He's still, a very young player. This is the first year he's, gotten consistent minutes. And as a young player, we're going to kind of see them go through some struggles offensively. I think in future years, he's going to be one of the best on-ball defenders in the NBA. Just his length and activity defensively, he's really able to guard 1 through 4 pretty comfortably. We've seen him take on the other team's best offensive player and, limit them. Many games that we've seen this season, he's done that. So, we just got to trust the process with Jordan Walsh. I think, the more games he plays in, yes, we're going to see him struggle through the course of a season, but I think we've seen enough, or I've seen enough at this point to kind of believe that, he's a very valuable player for this team and in future years to come.
Yeah, I agree. I think you shouldn't give up on Jordan Walsh. I think this is a guy who, again, with time and experience, he's just going to continue to get better. He's young, as Jaylen Brown says, he's Mr. Clean, or the garbage man, as people call him. Like, he'll live up to those expectations. It just comes with minutes and time. And this year is the perfect year for that. So I want to move into now the main report. So you guys know about the main report again. This time it's not really going to be highlighting the team as of recently because I am going to the game tomorrow. So we'll keep more of an eye on the game tomorrow and how the Celtics have been playing. But as of right now, coming off of Winter Showcase, the Celtics are now in 11th place. The main Celtics, sorry, with a record of 3-4. However, I want to highlight a guy. They've been picking it up. You know, they were struggling at first, but now they're picking it up. And I want to highlight one particular guy, and that is Amari Williams, because he has had two outstanding performances as of recently. And here's the first one. 30 points, 14 rebounds, and shot 75% from the field goal. Again, that just showed his greatness. But then the next game, he comes out and has arguably an even better game with 33 points, 16 rebounds, and shot 68% from the field goal. Again, I am so high on Amari Williams, and I think this is a guy who he didn't really display a lot of assists those games. I think he had like 3 or something like that, but this is a guy who, you know, can affect the game at many different ways. And we were talking about this earlier in the podcast too, how, you know, this is a guy we trust, and I trust him especially. And this is a guy who I could potentially see be such a X factor for the Boston Celtics later. But, you know, there's been a lot of buzz on Amari Williams, and I think, you know, I'm going to say this. I think he deserves an opportunity soon to kind of show what he has, and don't know when that opportunity will be. But what are your thoughts about Amari Williams as of recently and his play with the main Celtics? Carl, we'll start off with you again.
Yeah, just like how the Boston Celtics are performing this season, his potential and everything he's doing right now gets me very excited to see what he's going to do, for not just us, but for himself in the future. Because, yeah, that's definitely a very, valuable, center, and somebody that, again, we don't have to make meaningless trades to potentially have to give up such a great asset. As you've mentioned prior, Griffin, that is potentially a baby Jokic in the making right there. And, this is somebody who could easily go from, coming off of the bench for Kada to maybe even starting with, some even more development and more, miles on him. So definitely after seeing, a bit of his highlights and seeing, a bit of how he's performed and everything and how highly you and many others have talked about him, I'm so excited to see, what Amari Williams can do for this team and for the Celtics. And, if he truthfully is going to become an X factor.
I think, yeah, Amari Williams, has all the potential in the world to be a quality or a great NBA player. You don't just you don't just score 30 points and, be 75% efficient from the field goal and 60 whatever percent from the field that he was. But what stands out to me about Amari Williams is his playmaking ability. Something that, isn't that natural for big men to see the court like that and make quick decisions. But that's something we've seen a few times. He's had a number of triple doubles down up in Maine this season. And if you can kind of continue to develop a guy like that, that is a game-changing prospect that you have. I think, if they kind of let him play out the season in the G League, give him another summer to develop, get, caught up with the NBA speed and, hopefully get some more minutes, play in the summer league team. I think this is a guy that can contribute in many ways for, years down the line. And I think Griffin's already said it. Just very high on Amari Williams and excited to kind of see where he goes moving forward.
Yeah, and I want to try to get up this video at some point. So while you guys are talking, I will bring it up because Amari Williams, I want to show you guys his playmaking ability as well. So I'm going to bring this up. But my next question for you guys with Amari Williams is, when do you believe he should get an opportunity with the Boston Celtics? Because, again, I think he's been playing so good and he hasn't seen a lot of minutes. Do you think he's going to get those minutes this year at some point, or what are your thoughts, Carl?
I would say you could give him an opportunity this year, not necessarily putting him in a massive role, but at least allowing him to, dip his feet or dip his toes in the water and, get a feel of, how this team is operating and how Tommy is also has talked about get up to speed in the NBA or at least a peak of that. Just give him an opportunity to really feel things out and see how he can bring over the talents that he currently has in Maine over to Boston in the near future when he eventually is relied upon even more.
Yeah, I think, I don't think it's a bad idea for him to possibly get some spot minutes this year just to see kind of where he's at. But I think, thinking long term here, I would kind of give him the rest of the season in Maine and give him a full off season to kind of, put on the extra 5 to 10 pounds of muscle and just to continue to grow as a player as a whole. I think, him being a lefty and the touch that he seems to have around the rim matched with his playmaking ability, I think, you can have something really special in him. So I don't see any need to kind of rush him up and give him any large amounts of minutes this year. But if, there's a few games where Cade is banged up or Luka Garza is banged up and you kind of want to see, what he could possibly give you down the line, I don't think it'd be a bad idea to kind of throw him in there and give him a few minutes against certain teams where you feel he matches up well. But I'm not in any real hurry to kind of get him up to Boston this season. But he's playing tremendously in Maine, and hopefully, we kind of continue to see that from him and what he can provide for the Boston Celtics in future years.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, his development, you have to wait a little bit more and kind of grow and see. Like, again, they've done such a great job on, the development in Maine and going up from Maine to the Celtics. And I think this is a guy that you really need to capitalize on. But I want to talk about Ron Harper too, really quick, while I just push this up and try to get you guys this video because it's worth waiting for. What are your guys' thoughts on Ron Harper? Because again, we talked about this earlier in the podcast. If you potentially see Anthony Simons move, do you see Ron Harper being put on a standard deal and taking over that backup position? Because again, we don't have a lot of guard depth. Would you be opposed to that? And we'll start off with you, Carl.
Kind of just like the whole Mari Williams thing. Again, maybe have him, dip his toes into the water a bit in the NBA, but for the most part, should be, focusing on developing more in Maine. And, there's the potential of him really becoming part of that guard depth for us, but you don't want to put him out there too soon.
Yeah, I like Ron Harper a lot. I think, he's proved a lot to probably himself and the fans this year. Can really score on all three levels of the court, and his playmaking ability, and when he gets hot from three, he's really a dead-eye shooter. So I think I wouldn't be opposed if, Simons got traded or they just bring him up to a standard deal. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But I also don't see much of a downside of him kind of staying in Maine and continuing to let his confidence grow as a player and just become more all well-rounded, I guess, defensively as well, because I feel like that's where the biggest leap is from the G League to the NBA is able to play defense. And I think that's where, we'd see him struggle the most because I think he's a confident offensive player that can score the ball. And so it would kind of just be defensively, where would he stand, if he got minutes in the NBA this season?
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a good fallback guy. And I think this is a guy that I'm still very impressed on. And, again, you don't sign a guy to a 2-way contract if you don't think he could provide for you at some point and be a player of the future. So I do believe in Ron Harper Jr., and I think he could be that. And I wouldn't mind giving him an opportunity if you traded Simons. But again, we don't know what's going to even play out. But I have the Mari Williams video, and I'm so happy I found this because I was so close to just putting up my phone to the camera, and it's so much better when we could actually live it. But here is a great play from Amari Williams, and I swear if it's the wrong play, I'm gonna cry. But let's put it up. You guys see that pass? Hold on. I got to show it one more time because I think he goes from the right to the left and passes it because all right, Tommy, You break it down for us after, because you're a basketball wizard, with college hoops and everything. So break it down for us after, but I'm gonna show it one more time. You would think he's a guard in that video. That's all I'm saying. You would think he was a guard.
I can't even see the video, dude. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, you can't see the video?
No.
Oh, wait. Did it go too fast? Or is it just not showing up for you?
It might just not be showing up for me.
All right, hold on. Let's try one more. Carl, did you see the video, or am I going insane?
Yeah, I saw the video.
All right, let's try one more time for Tommy.
Sure.
Oh, there we go. I got it.
All right, we'll give it to you one more time, Tommy, because you saw it. Let's give it to him one more time. You need it another time? Because I could play this video all day. I could play it all.
I think, that's a play right there where, you can't really teach that to anybody as a coach. That is something that some players are kind of born with naturally, just having that feel and IQ as a player of knowing where all of your teammates are at all times. You kind of caught the ball in the middle of the court there, and it looked like he was going to either make a move to the basket or kind of look to his right. And then he kind of spun back to the middle and saw that cutter and threw a quick, over the shoulder pass right on the money. But those type of plays are the plays that get me really excited about Amari Williams and his playmaking ability, because again, that is something that is really hard to teach big men, especially at that level, and especially kind of where Amari Williams is in his career. It's his first year playing in the G League, and him, being able to show off his playmaking moves is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and he looked like a guard in that video. He looks like a guard, I have to say. Like that pass looks like, you're a guard, not a big man. If that's what, again, what you said, Tommy, excites me about that. But Carl, do you have anything else on Amari Williams, or are you guys ready to move forward to the road ahead?
Let's move forward.
All right, perfect. Well, we're back to done with the main stuff. Sorry about that. But now the upcoming road ahead. So tonight, obviously the Celtics play the Nuggets, and this podcast won't be uploaded till tomorrow. So you guys are just going to have to take our word with this. And no, we are not lying. And it is Wednesday, 6:15. So we're actually creeping up on tip-off. So make sure to tune into the recap. You guys are going to see this tomorrow. So tune into the recap, I guess, the night before. So first Wednesday tonight, we have the Denver Nuggets and then the Boston Celtics. And all of these games are home except for the Pacers one. So 3 games at home. Then Friday, the Celtics take on the Toronto Raptors. And then Saturday, the Celtics take on the Spurs. And lastly, Monday, they take on the Pacers at Indiana. But what is your predictions? And Carl, we'll start off with you. What are the Celtics after these 4 games? What do you see them being in this 4-game span? Nuggets, Raptors, Spurs, and Pacers.
I could see them either going 3-1 or 2-2, just because Spurs have been on a roll. I know they recently lost their matchup, but they're still one of the better teams in the West. And probably losing out to the Indiana Pacers. Again, that's a team that, even with them being as bad as they are this season, they are always, fighting. They're always grinding. And we saw that with the last 2 encounters against the Pacers. So, I would not be surprised if it was 2-2, but I'll be a bit optimistic. I'll say 3-1.
Okay, so they lose to the Spurs, though. You're going.
The Pacers. I'll say the Pacers.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
you think all right. I like that.
I'm going to say 3-1 as well. I was thinking being optimistic and saying 4-0, but it feels like every time I try to be optimistic on these, they have a rough week. So I'm going to say 3-1. I think they handle business tonight against a Jokic-less Nuggets. I think the Raptors game will be closer than people think. I kind of think Toronto's a younger team that's playing with some confidence this season. So I'm going to say if they lose a game this week, it will be to Toronto. That'll be like my little hot take. But and then I think they take care of business against the Spurs, which will be an extremely fun game. I hope Wemby plays. I'm pretty sure he's healthy again, and it's so fun to watch. But that'll be a fun one, and I think they'll take care of business against the Pacers. So another good week, 3-1 for the Celtics, but I could see them going 4-0. But that's what I think this week.
I'm going towards Carl's idea. I would go 2-2, but again, I just learned that Jokic was still out, so I'm having them beat the Nuggets tonight. I'm having them beat Toronto. So it's fun. It's funny that we all have a different loss because I think they do end up losing against the Spurs and then taking care of business against the Pacers. So it's funny. We all have a different loss, but we all got them going 3-1. But let us know what you guys think in the comments down below. But do you guys have any final thoughts again before we close out this podcast?
It's kind of excited to see, man. Another fun week ahead, and this team's fun to watch right now. So every night it's something different, and we'll see who steps up and what happens. I'm excited.
Yeah. What about you, Carl?
I'm excited too. That's all.
I gotta say, this is gonna be a fun week and good talks as always. Again, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications, and make sure to tune into the recaps. We've been doing them live, so go check them out, and we will see you guys with the next one. Peace, guys.